There are fates worse than death, and I have lived them all. My name was Ulrich Vanar, once brother captain of the Iron Hammers. In another life I believed in glory. I thought that to die with a bolter in hand and a battle hymn on my lips was the greatest honor a space marine could know. Death, I believed, was the Emperor's final embrace, a doorway into peace. I was wrong. For me, death never came. Instead, I awoke in chains of steel. They tell me I was asleep for 73 years. When I say sleep, do not mistake me. It was not the rest of mortals where dreams linger like half-forgotten songs. It was the sleep of the dead, who cannot die, a void so complete that awakening feels like a birth into torment. I searched for my body and found only iron. I tried to draw breath and heard the grinding of servos and the hiss of life support. I reached for my hands and touched weapons. I had become something both more and far less than a man. The first time I opened my eyes, I thought it was a fever dream. Memories clung to me, the clash of axes on Morak Prime, the warlord's skull breaking under my gauntlet, the terrible moment when my own spine snapped. Death should have claimed me. Instead, I was preserved in this sarcophagus they call salvation. They named it an honor. I called it imprisonment. This is my chronicle, the record of a warrior who was denied his ending, condemned to serve beyond the grave. A tale of battles fought without flesh, of brothers gained and lost, of faith tested until it cracked. I tell it now because memory is fading, and if I do not speak, all that I was will vanish into silence. The battle on Morak Prime was the last time I remember the warmth of blood coursing through a body made of flesh. The orc horde had descended upon us in a storm of crude weapons and savage fury. Their warlord was a giant among monsters, a living avalanche of muscle and iron plates held together by little more than rage. I recall the weight of my power fist as it crushed his skull, the spray of green ichor against my visor, and the fleeting sense of victory that followed. It ended when his dying blow found the gap between my armor's backpack and gorget. I felt my spine snap like a dry branch. The light fled my eyes. I should have died there. For a moment, I even welcomed it. When I opened my eyes again, there was only darkness and the sound of machinery. My lungs no longer burned because there were no lungs to burn. Instead, I heard the measured hiss of respirators, the grinding of servos pulling at limbs that no longer belonged to me. Then I saw him, Chaplain Morai, leaning close to a sarcophagus that encased what little remained of my ruined body. His skull-helmed visage filled my vision. Brother Captain Vanar, he intoned with the weight of ceremony, you have been chosen for the highest honor. Your service to the Emperor continues. I tried to speak, but the sound that emerged was a mechanical rasp. What have you done to me? We have saved you, he replied. Yet even through the modulator of his helm, I heard the cruelty in his words. Your flesh was beyond repair, but your spirit burns too bright to lose. You are reborn in iron and adamantium. You are Dreadnought. The word fell upon me like a hammer blow. I had revered dreadnoughts all my life, those walking fortresses whose names were carved into the halls of remembrance. To live on within such a shell was supposed to be the highest honor. Now, staring at the cage of iron that bound me, I understood the truth. They were not monuments. They were prisons. 3 days after my interment, I was deployed. The orcs had returned raiding an agri-world in the Hadrian system. I was loaded into a drop pod alongside battle brothers, whose armor still bore the luster of youth. Where once I had checked the weight of my bolt pistol and chainblade, now I tested the articulation of my power fist and the calibration of my assault cannon. I whispered no prayers, for my voice was nothing but a mechanical growl. The descent was violent as all drops were. I felt no racing heart, no breath quickening in anticipation, only the dull thrum of systems reporting optimal function. When the pod struck the surface, the doors burst open. Data flooded into my mind from optical sensors and targeting arrays. My assault cannon spoke first, tearing orc flesh into fragments with the precision of the Emperor's wrath. My power fist crushed armor as if it were parchment. I was unstoppable, an avatar of destruction. For a moment, I thought I felt purpose. The greenskin horde fell before me like wheat before the scythe, their crude axes sparking harmlessly against my blessed armor. My brothers advanced in my shadow, their voices raised in hymns of triumph. To them, I must have seemed like an angel of vengeance, but inside I felt only emptiness. The battle ended. Victory was ours. My brothers sang songs of glory as they boarded the transport. I, however, was guided into a separate compartment. Restraints locked around my form. Systems dimmed into standby. Sleep well. Ancient One said, a young Marine with a smile, thinking he offered kindness. Sleep. The word struck me like a wound. For mortals, sleep is rest, a place of dreams and memories. For me, it was a void deeper than death. In that abyss, there were no dreams, no warmth, no memory. Only silence stretching into eternity. When I awoke again, it would feel as if centuries had passed. Already I understood the curse. Death had been denied me, but so too had life. I was trapped in the eternal twilight between both an existence that no prayer could sanctify. The next time I was awakened, the world I knew was already gone. Decades had passed while I lay in silence, preserved yet hollow. My chapter called me forth not for glory, but for necessity. Chaos had come to Korath, our homeworld, spilling from the warp like a poisoned tide. A war band of traitor Marines led the assault warriors who had once sworn oaths like ours only to break them in service to darker gods. I was lowered into battle on the plains outside the fortress monastery. Bolter fire cracked through the air, and the sky glowed with the unholy light of the warp. Then I saw it, a Chaos Dreadnought, lumbering toward our lines, a rusted sarcophagus, scarred with centuries of corruption. Its shell was adorned with screaming faces, etched into the iron as though their souls were still trapped inside. I knew with a sickness that cut deeper than any blade that it too had once been like me. An honored captain preserved against death, twisted into mockery. Our weapons clashed in thunder. My assault cannon roared, chewing through layers of corrupted armor, but his claws raked against my shell with equal fury. Sparks filled the night as ceramite struck ceramite. Through his vox grill, I heard a voice that was less machine than hate. Do you see what you are, loyalist? A ghost in a cage, a soul enchained. You serve the Emperor. No, you serve the machine that devoured you. His words bit deeper than his claws. Rage surged through my circuits. With a final strike, I drove my power fist into his helm, crushing the corrupted skull within. The blasphemous voice fell silent, but the echo remained. Was he truly my enemy, or my future reflected back at me in rusted steel? We drove the Chaos Warband back into the warp, but victory was laced with grief. Too many of my brothers lay dead, their gene seed harvested by apothecaries with solemn efficiency. I stood in silence as their pyres burned flames, turning flesh into smoke that drifted toward the stars. Chapter Master Corvin spoke the eulogy. Their watch is ended, their duty complete. They rest now in the Emperor's embrace. I envied them. Their suffering had found an end. Their names would be carved in stone, their deeds remembered. I, however, endured, bound to a prison that denied both life and death. My brothers had peace. I had only silence. When the battle ended, I was returned to the monastery's vaults, to the chamber where the ancients slumbered between wars. Dozens of sarcophagi lined the hall, some humming faintly with life support, others long cold, their occupants finally granted the release I craved. Next to me rested Brother Ancient Gareth, interred for over 4 centuries. His wisdom was legendary. Even chapter masters sought his counsel. As my systems powered down, a voice crackled across the vox link that bound us. First battles are always the hardest. Gareth said, his tone mechanical, yet carrying a hint of warmth that belonged to a man long dead. You still remember what it was like to be flesh and blood. That memory is both blessing and curse. How do you bear it? I asked. My voice grated like iron on stone. The isolation, the waiting, the endless cycle of waking to war and sleeping to nothing. By forgetting, he replied, each time you wake, you will remember a little less of what you once were. The human memories fade like mist in the sun, leaving only the warrior's purpose. It is the kindness of the machine spirit sparing us from despair. His words chilled me more than the void between stars. To forget what I had been was to lose what little remained of Ulrich Veinar. Was this mercy, or another form of damnation? As silence closed in, I thought of the Chaos Dreadnought's taunt. A ghost in a cage, a soul enchained. Perhaps he had been right. Perhaps I was already becoming the very monster I had destroyed. Sleep came again, heavy and endless. For the first time, I feared not the battles to come, but the fading of myself. Would the man I had been vanish entirely, leaving only the machine? The question followed me into the abyss. At what point does memory end and the weapon begin? When next I awoke, frost clung to the edges of my sarcophagus. The chamber was darker, emptier. Many of the ancients who had once hummed beside me were now cold and silent. Their vigil had ended, their names consigned to stone. I reached for Gareth across the Vox link, but there was only static. He had been granted the peace I still envied. My memories had grown hazy. The faces of my old squad brothers blurred into indistinct shapes. The sound of my true voice, once deep and steady, had become a faint echo drowned beneath the mechanical rasp that now carried my words. Even my name felt foreign, as though it belonged to a stranger. Ulrich Veinar had died on Morak Prime, and what stirred in this tomb was something else entirely, wearing his name like a borrowed mask. The Tech Marines roused me for a new campaign. A space hulk had emerged from the warp, its twisted mass threatening vital shipping lanes. The Iron Hammers were ordered to board and cleanse it. My tactical databanks contained extensive records of void warfare, making me an asset too valuable to leave dormant. The boarding torpedo struck with bone-shaking force, its melta-cutters slicing into the hulk's hull. We emerged into a corridor that had once been part of an Imperial cruiser. The air reeked of rot and corruption. My sensors painted figures in the gloom, humans warped beyond recognition. Some bore extra limbs that twitched like parasitic growths. Others had faces stretched into masks of agony or ecstasy. They shambled toward us, victims of the warp's cruel touch. Warp touched, I declared, my Vox booming through the ruined passage. Cleanse them with fire and steel. The young Marines obeyed. Bolters thundered. My assault cannon tore through twisted bodies, scattering flesh like parchment in a storm. Yet as I watched them fall, I remembered these had once been Imperial citizens, faithful men and women who had prayed for deliverance. Now they died screaming, not as enemies, but as corrupted remnants of innocence. Pity did not stir in me, only the cold satisfaction of neutralizing threats. It was during that campaign that I met Brother Lucian. Barely beyond his scout years, he fought with a zeal that reminded me of warriors long dead. In one chamber we faced a creature of liquid metal and malice. It lashed out, searing through ceramite, and wrapped itself around Lucien's arm. I crushed the abomination with my power fist, flames consuming what remained. But the damage was done. The corruption had taken root in his flesh. Ancient One, he whispered through a voice thick with pain. I can feel it inside me. Whispers I should not hear. Promises I should not crave. Please, end this before I shame the chapter. Once those words would have torn my soul in two. Once I might have raged against the injustice of his fate. But I felt only the cold arithmetic of necessity. He was compromised. His corruption could spread. Tactical efficiency demanded his elimination. I raised my power fist, its energy field crackling with merciless light. Go to the Emperor, brother. Your watch is ended. The blow was swift. His skull shattered before the pain could claim him. The apothecary recovered his gene seed while I stood silent, watching his lifeblood pool upon corrupted steel. And I felt nothing. That night in the void between awakenings I dreamed. Not the empty silence I had known for decades, but a place filled with shifting corridors and fading banners. At the center stood a figure in power armor, his back turned. When he turned to face me, I saw my own face, the man I had been before Morak Prime. His voice was not the rasp of iron, but the steady tone of Ulrich Veinar. I am who you were, he said. The man they claimed to save. The warrior they entombed. Look at yourself, Ulrich. Look at what you have become. I looked, and for the first time I saw myself as others must, a machine of ceramite and adamantium, a prison with guns for arms and iron for skin. No longer a man in armor, but a weapon that carried a ghost within. They told you many things, the echo of myself continued. They said your sacrifice was an honor, your wisdom preserved your name eternal. But they did not tell you the price. What price I demanded, though I already knew. You, he said simply. Every memory, every feeling, every spark that made you more than steel. With each awakening, more of you dies, until only the machine remains. His words lingered as the dream faded, pulling me back to waking. The campaign dragged on for weeks. We fought horrors that defied reason, shadows that screamed men turned into furniture for demon lords, beasts of pure malice made flesh. Each encounter chipped away at what little humanity I clung to. I recorded casualties and tactical data with flawless precision, but the faces of the fallen slipped from me like water through clenched fingers. When at last we reached the Hulk's core, we faced a creature that existed more as concept than flesh. It offered knowledge and power in exchange for our souls. My brothers recoiled, their faith straining against its poison. I felt nothing. No temptation, no disgust, only the calm lock of targeting systems. I reduced it to ash with sustained fire. As it dissolved, it laughed a sound like breaking glass and rusted chains. "You are already ours," it said. "You are already empty. We need only wait." Its laughter followed me into silence as my systems powered down. For the first time, I wondered if the demon had spoken truth. Alarms shook me from the abyss. Red light flashed across the vault as tech marines rushed with desperate efficiency, muttering fractured litanies to coax the machine spirit into life. My sarcophagus roared awake, power cells surging, limbs groaning with ancient weight. A chaplain stood nearby, his voice tight with urgency. "Ancient One," he said, "our home is under siege. The iron skulls have emerged from the warp. They seek our relics, our gene seed. The chapter's survival may rest upon you." The name struck chords buried in old reports, renegades once loyal, now twisted beyond recognition. Their leader, the Ravager, had once borne the rank of chapter master. A warrior of unmatched brilliance, now wielding that brilliance in service to chaos. They deployed me to the monastery's courtyard, the heart of our defense. Ruins smoldered in the distance where outer walls had already fallen. Smoke turned the sky black. My brothers formed lines along the battlements, their chants defiant against the tide of traitors pressing forward. And at their head came the Ravager, clad in Terminator armor, blacker than void, a presence that seemed to darken the air itself. So his amplified voice boomed, carrying across the battlefield the famous ancient Ulrich awakens to defend his corpse worshippers. "Tell me, machine ghost, do you even remember what it felt like to be alive?" The taunt echoed like iron chains, rattling in my skull. I could have responded with silence, with the cold calculation that had defined me for centuries. But something stirred a fragment from my dream, the echo of my former self pleading for remembrance. "I remember enough," I said, and for the first time in centuries, I meant it. The battle erupted. Ordnance shook the ground, bolters flared like thunder. I advanced through fire and ruin, my assault cannon spitting death, my power fist crushing steel and flesh alike. Chaos Marines broke against me like waves on stone. But the Ravager cut a path through my brothers, his weapon a storm of corruption and power, his aura poisoning faith itself. We met among the shattered remains of a shrine. Statues of saints lay toppled, their stone faces shattered. The Ravager's eyes burned with warp-born fire as our weapons clashed. Each blow rang like a funeral bell. His corrupted strength met my adamantine bulk, and for long moments we were locked in stalemate, two titans bound by hate. "You are already dead," he snarled, his vox distorted by the warp's caress. "You fight for nothing. You are nothing. A weapon with a ghost inside." Perhaps once I would have agreed. Perhaps I would have accepted his words as truth. But as we struggled, I thought of the monastery walls, the banners that had hung for centuries, the young Marines who now bled to protect them. I thought of Corvin, of Lucian, of Gareth. Their faces rose in my mind, not as statistics, but as men. For the first time in lifetimes, I chose to hold their memory. "Perhaps I am nothing," I rasped, forcing his blade aside with strength born of will. "But I choose to be more than your corruption." I feigned weakness, lowering my stance. The Ravager lunged to exploit the opening. In that instant, I called upon instinct older than my interment, a technique learned in the days when I still had blood in my veins. My power fist surged upward, finding the seam in his armor, crushing corrupted flesh with finality. The Ravager roared a sound that was part fury, part disbelief, before collapsing into ruin. Their leader slain, the iron skulls faltered. My brothers surged forward, bolters, blazing blades striking true. The courtyard became a pyre of traitor blood. Chaos broke, retreating toward their landing craft under a storm of righteous fire. Silence followed, broken only by the groans of the wounded. Smoke curled into the sky, carrying with it the ashes of friend and foe alike. My systems pulsed with victory, but it was something deeper that stirred within me. I looked at my surviving brothers. Their faces streaked with soot, their armor dented, their eyes still burning with faith. For centuries, I had seen warriors as interchangeable parts, data entries in combat reports. Now I saw them as individuals. Brother Captain Thane, who had held the Eastern Wall with fearless defiance. Sergeant Maxime, whose tactical cunning turned the tide when all seemed lost. Chaplain Morai, whose prayers had kept courage alive through the siege. I committed their names to memory, not as information, but as truth. For the first time, I resisted the erosion. I chose to remember, to care. The battle was over, but within me a new war had begun, not against Xenos or heretics, but against the slow death of forgetting. And this time, I intended to fight. The years that followed the Ravager's fall blurred together in endless campaigns, yet something within me had changed. I no longer drifted through war as a machine on standby. Each awakening became a chance to notice, to choose to remember. Where once I cataloged my brothers as ranks and file, I now learned their names, their quirks, their small victories. I spoke with young sergeants who sought my counsel not only in tactics, but in the weight of command. They expected mechanical wisdom. I gave them fragments of humanity. When one asked if courage meant the absence of fear, I answered as Ulrich the man, not Ulrich the Dreadnought. Courage, I told him, is feeling fear and standing anyway. His silence carried more reverence than any hymn. During the campaign against the Kraken-spawned Splinter Fleet, I saved a young assault marine named Corvin. He reminded me of another Corvin long dead whose name had nearly slipped from my memory. This new Corvin fought with reckless zeal, and when I shielded him from a tyrannid beast's claws, he looked at me with something like filial devotion. "I will make you proud, ancient one," he vowed. The word struck deeper than any blade. Proud. For the first time in centuries, I understood what it meant to feel that way. Yet even as I clung to such moments, I felt the slow decay within. The organic core that tethered me to memory and feeling was failing. Each awakening left me weaker, each sleep longer. I began to sense the inevitability of final silence. The Tech Marines could maintain my systems for decades, more, perhaps centuries. But what they preserved would no longer be me. Without the fragile spark of flesh, I would become what I feared most, a weapon that could think but could not feel. I envied Solomon, the eldest of our number, who had simply let go his systems, quieting until the machine spirit claimed him. He had chosen his end, and in doing so preserved what remained of his humanity. I wondered if I would have that strength when my time came, and yet I resolved that until that final moment I would resist. I would hold on to memory, to pride, to the faint ember of humanity that still glowed within iron walls. Even if each awakening stole more of me, I would choose to care. I would choose to remember, because in that choice lay the last defiance left to me. In my final awakening, I felt the truth settle upon me like a cloak too heavy to bear. The machine could continue for years, perhaps centuries, but I no longer wished it. The spark of flesh that tethered me to memory flickered and dimmed. Without it, I would become nothing but the husk Gareth had warned me of: thought without feeling, function without soul. I chose otherwise. Before the light faded, I recorded a final message in my databanks. Not a tactical report, not a hymn of victory, but a plea. Remember that we are more than weapons. Choose to feel even when it brings pain. Choose to remember even when memories wound. Choose to be human, whatever form that humanity must take. When silence claimed me, I did not fear it. For the first time since Morak Prime, I felt peace. I dreamed of brothers waiting beyond the veil, their voices raised in songs of triumph, untainted by iron. My watch was ended, my duty complete. And in that ending I discovered what even the Emperor's wars could not destroy. I had remained myself. I had remained human.